Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Omega. Welcome for this video commentary for the 4-man speedrun of Heaven and High, a deep dungeon of Final Fantasy XIV. So Heaven and High, or HOH, or the Pillar, because I'm used to saying Pillar, since in French HOH is called literally the Sky Pillar. As I mentioned, is a deep dungeon. It is composed of 100 floors, and the idea of the speedrun is to navigate through all those floors as fast as possible. What makes deep dungeons, and therefore HOH, and therefore the speedrun, very interesting is the fact that, the dungeon behaves pretty much like a roguelike. The floors are generated randomly, and what I mean by generated, I mean the layout, the monsters within them, and the obstacles, the traps that we will find, but also the resources that we will be able to find to help our way through the dungeon. In terms of equipment, we have what is called ether pool. Since we are going or trying to go as fast as possible, we are obviously maxed out in terms of equipment. You'll see on the right-hand corner, the right-hand side of the screen, our character sheets, and you'll see +99 for the weapon and the armor. That basically means that we are as strong as possible. And the level will be synced. We will start at level 61, all the way to level 70, and we will gain level while progressing through the first 12 to 15 floors to be able to reach level 70, and then we will be capped at level 70. You'll be able to see that, contrary to the rest of speedrunning content in Final Fantasy XIV, and what I specifically refer to are speed kills, basically killing raid bosses as fast as possible, for which you need a very deep understanding of the classes that are involved and the boss's mechanics in order to understand why people that are doing speed kill are going so fast. Speedrunning deep dungeons and speedrunning Heaven on High is fairly easy to understand. It's pretty straightforward, especially considering the fact that the strategies and the philosophy of speedrunning are kind of similar to other roguelikes like The Binding of Isaac, where managing resources and mapping and pathfinding are crucial to going fast. So for this video, since I will possibly use this video to potentially submit the run of speedrunning Heaven on High to speedrunning Marathon, maybe I will try to be as pedagogical as possible, not trying to go too far into details, just to make sure that important information can be understood fairly easily. So I'll try to. You'll see that in the later part of the run, I will really go with play-by-play description. But for the first half, I will really try to bring a lot of generalities for people that don't really know Heaven and High or even speedrunning of this content, so that they can really understand what is going on. Unfortunately, I only have my point of view for this run. I was the only one streaming or recording. But since it is our PB at the moment and it has a very, very good ending with a lot of different strategies that have been used, I still wanted to use this run as a material for the description of the speedrun of HOH in general. So without further ado, let's go with the run. So we will be introduced to the basic elements of the speedrun with the very first floor. You'll see in the top right-hand corner the map that will show you the layouts of the floors, layouts which are every time randomly generated. So you see that floors are composed of square-ish rooms. Here, they are octagonal, but in general they are square-ish. And these rooms are connected to each other with small corridors between them. You see that there are monsters in those rooms. We can find monsters that are stuck to one room, and there are also patrols, mobs that are patrolling through the floor and basically navigating around the floor. So depending on the difficulty of the monsters, sometimes we kill them, and some other times we simply dodge them and move around them. So how can we progress from one floor to the next one? Well, there are two prerequisites. The first is to find the teleportation beacon that is represented by a key. You see in the top right hand corner in the map, I am in the room with the key at the moment. But finding this room and finding the key is not sufficient. There is another prerequisite, and we need to make a certain amount of kills, killing sufficient mobs in order to activate the beacon. So with this comes the first general strategy that we will use really throughout the run, and the idea is to when we appear in the spawn room, like you will see in this floor, the idea is to navigate as fast as possible, map the floor as fast as possible to identify where the key is, while making kills on the way and progressing towards activating the beacon. To that end, we are separating the group into two entities. The first is the other group, Deika, who is the paladin, the tank, and Poulet and Bibiri, who are the two DPS that are coming with him, are basically going one way in order to map the floor. And Deika will pull all the monsters because he's a tank. He has the ability to grab aggro on the monsters so that the DPSs are safe. And Poulet and Bibiri are just nuking the monsters that are following Deika. Me, on the other hand, since I am a ninja, and I will come later explaining a little bit more which role or the importance of which role. But basically, as a ninja, I have a little bit more mobility than the other three characters. So I am basically the scout. My goal is if there are two entrances, like here on this floor, it is to find another way than where Deika is going in order to map the floor and to localize the key as soon as possible. The difficulty of the content in Heaven and High is gradual. Basically, the idea is that we are moving through sets of floors composed of 10 floors. So here we're going to go from floor 1 to floor 10, and every 10 floors there is going to be a boss. And after defeating the boss, we go into another set. And the difficulty basically goes up a notch every 10 floor. And here, while we are not still capped in terms of level, as you can see, I'm only level 73. Monsters here in the beginning of the run are really easy to kill. So what's important here is that all of us can pretty much kill everything on our way, myself included. I can solo monsters really easily. And what is important in terms of speedrunning here in the first 30 to 40 floors is really mapping as fast as possible and the pathfinding, taking the best trajectories in order to be as optimal as possible when navigating around the floors. Because the monsters at the moment making the kills is not really that complicated since pretty much all 3 DPSs can 2 to 3 shot every single monster, if not one shot them. In terms of randomness and what makes HOH behave like a roguelike, well, there are a lot of random elements. First, the patterns of monsters, the amount of monsters there are in rooms, is going to be random, whether there are some patrols or not. The kill requirement for each floor is also random. In general, the average is between 5 to 7 monsters, but sometimes you can encounter high kill floors, where you need to kill up to 10, even up to 12 monsters, even slightly more than that, which can be extremely painful, especially in the later floors where monsters are a lot tankier and take much longer to kill. Another type of obstacle that the game can put in our path are traps, floor traps. At the moment, they are not visible, but we can use a resource to map them to be able to visualize them. And they have various effects. There is a landmine that is going to inflict a lot of damage in an AoE, but what can be very interesting is that it obviously deals damage to us characters, but it can also deal damage to the monsters. So we can also use landmines, especially when you can see them, thanks to the resource that I mentioned earlier, to set a trap with the monsters, basically. Something that you've seen a couple times already is the otter trap. You've seen me transform into a little cute otter. It can be painful, especially when you're playing this content solo. You turn into an otter. You cannot do anything. You cannot attack. You cannot defend yourself. You cannot even open chests, which is pretty painful. And also, your max health is reduced by half. There are other traps, like the luring trap, that we're going to see a few times throughout the run. And I will mention each trap if they are important throughout the commentary. So here we have another type of randomness element, the big floors, the big rooms. There can be random, and we will see another one at at floor 15, because the 50th floor, 15th, floor is always a big room. So they basically behave like normal floors, but you don't see the walls between the rooms. You don't see little corridors. And another element is that you can have fake teleportation beacons. And as you saw, we decided not to invest a resource that I will mention later in order to remove the fake teleportation beacons. And that cost us a little bit of time, because we had to clear 2 fake beacons before finding the real one. Finally, another type of random element outside of the resources that I will mention later are the floor buffs and debuffs. Here, in this floor, in floor 9, you see in the top right hand corner a little icon with the little 2 stars and then a negative or a stop sign. This means that we no longer have for this floor automatic HP regen. It is not a really problematic debuff, because we're really strong and survivability is not really an issue in these floors. But there are much more painful debuffs like blindness, which will make us miss like half of our attacks, damage downs, a gloom, which buffs the enemy, and I will come back later to the floor debuffs when they really matter. At the moment, they're not really that important. And so, as I mentioned, every 10th floor we fight a boss. But considering the fact that we have 3 DPSs, that we are maxed in terms of equipment, well, the bosses really do not matter in this run, at least up until floor 70. But the first 5 to 6 bosses are simply going to get nuked. So there's not even a start of a strategy on this boss. We just burst them down. So something else that you've seen me do at the start of every floor, because it is my responsibility, is to open chests. And chests is basically the nitty-gritty of the run, managing the resources. And here you see, for instance, an invisible landmine that was pretty nice, because we used. I mean, it doesn't really matter in terms of damage, but it was cool to see the landmine explode and kill the mobs. But yeah, managing the resources is what makes this speedrun interesting, and another landmine here, and is what makes the later floors a lot easier to manage. So there are 3 types of treasure chests. The first type are the bronze chests, which are not really that interesting. They only contain potions or a token that you can exchange with a character to have some regen potions that are specific to heaven and high. You have silver chests or blue. I mean, silver chests that have a bluish shade to them. These are usually the one that you use to increase your equipment. As you can see on the right side of the screen, I apologize for the French, but it says substrat d'armes magiques and substrat d'armure magique. That basically says that our weapon, the first line, and our armor, the second line, are maxed out, because we've played this a lot, and it allows us to deal the most amount of damage. But I will come back later to the how ether pool works. Something very interesting with the silver chests, and why we still open them while we have our maxed equipment, is the fact that they can have something else than equipment. The first thing that they can have is a trap, meaning that if you open them exactly like this, they will deal damage in AoE. And this is very dangerous because while landmines are pretty interesting but not that scary, is the fact that they deal amount of damage that is proportionate towards your remaining HP, while blue chests deal damage regarding your max HP. So if you're not full life, opening a blue chest that contains a trap can lead to certain death. And I have a funny clip on my Twitch channel where Deika and Bibiri triggered a lane mine and opened a blue chest right after, and that led to a double kill. But the other interesting thing that can happen with silver chests is the fact that they can contain magicites, and this is the bottom line of our character sheets. Sorry, magilites in French, but magicites in English. And here at the moment we have one, and these magicites are a very very strong item because they can simply wipe the floor. They will kill everything that is moving around on the floor. And these resources will be used either when we already have 3 magicites and we find a chest that contains another one, so we have an extra magicite that we can use, or we will use them proactively in the later stages of the speedrun in order to go fast. And finally, the other type of resources are contained in the most numerous chests, which are the gold chests. And these contain special objects, all the little icons that you see on the character sheet, and that are going to allow us to move faster along the floors. So don't worry, I will not go through everything here in terms of describing every item because I will simply lose you in terms of description. But I will just give you some idea of what the type of resources we have access to. So we have resources that allow us to navigate more freely within the floor. The first one is the safety pomander. So those items are called pomanders. And the safety pomanders will remove the floor traps. So if we had used a safety pomander, I would not have triggered the otter trap that just turned me into an otter. The other types of the other type of pomander that can be used to allow us to navigate more easily around the floor is the site, which will reveal the map entirely. So this is very good for speedrunning because we localize the key as fast as possible as soon as we pop the item, basically. And it also allows us to identify the floor traps. They become visible, so we know where to dodge them. There are also different types of items that will increase our fighting capabilities. For instance, we have a strength pomander that increases damage by 30% for the person that uses the pomander. It is a single target item, so only the person that activates the item will receive the buff. And we have a steel pomander, which decreases damage taken by 40%. So these are the kind of items that we can use. As you can see, there are more than that. There are 16 different types of pomanders. And I will go over what pomander does what when it becomes relevant. So here, as I mentioned, in terms of strategy, well, mapping and pathfinding is really, really what happens there. It comes down to the point where the first 30 to 40 floors are fairly homogeneous in terms of time when we do multiple runs because of the fact that we are simply dependent or reliant on RNG, whether we find the key really fast, if the floor layout is not really big and that we don't need to spend like hours and hours finding the key and navigating through the floor, and we do not get screwed by the kill requirement, and all the monsters that we fight along the way are sufficient to activate the key, exactly like this. We clear the way from the spawn. The first room we killed everything, the second room that contained the key we killed everything, and that was sufficient to open the key. And these little RNG factors are basically what allows us to not waste 10, 15, 20 seconds going into another room to fetch a kill. So here we are on floor 19th. We find the key instantly in the second room. So what we do is we simply start to move in the following rooms. getting kills along the way, and as soon as we notice that the key is activated, and we have this little icon on the top right hand corner of the screen that tells us exactly when the key activates itself. So all we have to do is to is to uh, is to get into the beacon and move on towards the boss. So what we try to do, since we have characters, especially now that we switch which tank Deika plays, but I will go later into the roles in the next floor set. But what we try to do, especially if it allows us not to waste time because we are holding on resources too much, is to keep some of our most damaging abilities for the boss in order to burst them down as fast as possible. Something that we can also do is use another type of resource, which is a frailty. A frailty basically debuffs every monster on the floor, and if we use it on the boss, it also affects the boss. And it will basically increase damage taken by 30%, which is very strong because while Strength Commander only affects the person that uses the Strength Commander, Frailty Commanders will have an effect for all 4 characters that are hitting the boss. And this mostly depends on whether we are already capped. If we already have 3, because the cap, the maximum amount of commanders that you can have for one type is 3. And if we already have 3 commanders, we will have sometimes frailty on bosses. And this is exactly what I mean. And this was on the other way around. So what happened for Bibiri? He opened a blue chest, which dealt like 70% of his max health points. And then he triggered a landmine because landmines are regarding remaining HP, that was not an insta-kill for Bibiri. Okay, so let's mention the roles here. Why are we playing with the characters that we're playing? Well, the first thing that you noticed, especially if you're familiar with Final Fantasy XIV, is the fact that we are not playing with a healer. While most of the 4-man content, dungeons in general, are usually played with a healer. Well, the thing is that a healer does not deal as much DPS than a DPS, so this is one of the main reasons why we are not picking a healer. The other reason why we are not picking a healer is in terms of survivability. I mentioned a little bit earlier the fact that we can exchange certain tokens that we find in bronze chests in order to have very strong regen potions. And those potions are basically all that Deika needs, aside from his own survivability kit that comes with his tank to survive pretty much everything. In terms of why we pick the classes that we pick, well, we first started to run with a paladin, mostly because he has one of the safest kits in terms of survivability, in the sense that he has access to an on-demand an on-demand heal with a spell. So as long as Deika has mana points, he is able to use a spell called Clemency to heal himself. But the problem is that Paladin is really, especially at level 70, but in general, the tank that deals the least amount of damage. So now we are really starting to run with another tank called the Warrior, who is a little bit burstier. And with the changes that were brought by the latest expansion and Walker, he has more healing option, even though they are less on demand than the Paladin has. But in the following runs, especially if you follow the channel or if we are able to display the run in a marathon, you'll probably see Deika running with a warrior. The other pretty much mandatory class that we need to bring for the speedrun of Heaven on High is a ranged DPS. For a single reason, they have a party buff that increases the running speed of every party in a close AoE. This running speed deactivates itself when you start attacking, but it doesn't really matter because this buff, the peloton, I mean, it's called peloton in French, but I don't really know if it is the same name in English, but it is this little buff here that you can see with the mouse. And this allows us to run a little bit faster And considering how much we are running, how much travel time really impacts if we are wasting time or gaining time, the presence of a ranged DPS is at the moment we think absolutely mandatory because of the fact that the run is a little bit less than 2 hours long. All the instances where we are running allows us to gain a second here, a second there, and it really stacks up until the end of the run. And so, why are we running with a machinist? Well, simply because he is the burstiest one. The other DPSs of the range DPS class are pretty interesting, but they mostly work because they are buffing their teammates. And compared to 8-man content that is usually played in Final Fantasy XIV, here buffs would only benefit 3 other people. So their reward is not really as important. So this is why Machinist takes the spot. Why are we taking a summoner? Well, simply because at the moment, at level 70, the summoner is absolutely busted. It is so freaking strong. If you are familiar with the usage of FF Logs, which is a statistics website that allows you to check the DPS that is done by classes on certain bosses. If you take a look at the Ultimates fight, which is pretty much the only relevant, with quote unquote signs, content that can be played at level 70, while at the moment the max level is 90. Summoner is like miles ahead of the others, and it is so here is a luring trap. So here, as you can see, the luring trap makes 3 monsters spawn. So this was a little bit of a time waste, but you will see that luring traps can also be used to gain a little bit of time, and I will try to mention them when that happens. But yeah, going back to the summoner is really busted. It is supposed to be a caster, but it is pretty much as mobile as a ranged DPS. So this is why Bibiri and Poulet are following Deka, because Deka is just running in a straight line, grabbing aggro on pretty much everything, and just nuking stuff on the way. And here we have the one of the very few instances where we were able to grab an extra magicite. So you saw that the screen was like all flashy, and we had this big boss appearing in the middle of the room. So that clears everything. And since we had an extra site commander, we also were able to activate it, and we saw the little traps on the floor. And finally, the last spot. So this is kind of in debate, I guess, at the moment. The ninja is pretty neat because he has some pretty good damage options with his Naruto spells like the Katon and stuff. But we are really discussing whether bringing 2 summoners, considering how strong the summoner is at the moment, whether that would be a good idea or not. Nevertheless, the ninja has very cool attributes. The fact that with or without peloton, he's running faster than any other class, naturally. And he also has a little teleport spell that allows you to jump like 10 meters, which is pretty nice because the fact that you can reset it every time you use a lightning or fire spell, which means that you can teleport yourself, hit a lightning spell, and teleport yourself again. So in terms of mobility, the ninja is pretty neat, and it fits the role of the scout really well. So once again, the bosses are really not that important. We are nuking them, and this is the only time that this is going to happen. But at floor 30, we basically have the first game over screen. Like, hey, you completed the first part of Heaven and High, so the game pulls you out of the dungeon, puts you back onto the map, and then you have to activate to go back into the Heaven and High proper. So if you're really familiar with Final Fantasy XIV, and this is, I think, a little bit important for the speedrun, you may have noticed that every time we go into a set of 10 floors, we activate our sprint. Every character has the ability to sprint for 20 seconds if it activates the sprints outside of battle, or 10 seconds if it activates within a battle. And the cool thing is that certain statuses are carried through when you go into an instance, when you go into a dungeon, and the sprint belongs to them. And the way that the game works, every time you start a dungeon, it resets your cooldowns. So the cool trick that we do is that when we are seeing the prompt that allows us to go into the dungeon, we pop our sprint, activate the prompt, go into the dungeon, and then we have, depending on the loading times, we have 10 to 12 seconds of sprint, but we still have our sprint available to be clicked again. So this allows mostly Deika sprinting like 10 seconds, pulling stuff, and sprinting again, which allows them to move really fast. So here, in terms of strategy, well, basically the same principle that we used before are still ongoing. The monsters are still really, really easy to defeat. Even myself, when I'm scouting and I end up being alone in a room where I need to make kills to progress, or because I found the key and I need to clear the path for the teammates, I am still like in no danger whatsoever. So something that you can probably hear with the Lila, I kept the volume a little bit so that you could hear, even if it's in French. Maybe you can grasp the gist of it. But communication is extremely important in this speedrun. Obviously, whenever I find the key, or Deika and the rest of the party finds the key, they call it instantly. Hey, we found the key. So if we need to move, or if we meet the kill requirements, then we gotta go to the other way. Exactly like what happened right there. But also something that is important regarding the kill requirement is to communicate on the number of kills, on the number of monsters. Let's say that I find the key, but there are only 2 monsters in the key. That means that those 2 kills will most likely and obviously not be sufficient in order to activate the teleportation beacon. So that tells that if Deika finds a room with only 3 mobs, 3 plus 2 equals 5, then he probably needs to go into another room to go a little bit farther, or maybe activate a luring trap if he finds it, exactly like this, in order to make the kills. And you'll see that this plays really nice. Normally, luring traps can be a waste of time, but there, since I localized the teleportation beacon instantly by peeking into the corridor and finding the beacon, you see that after killing all 3 mobs of the luring trap, we still didn't have the teleportation activated. So this allows us to move straight into the key room, kill everything, and then this saves us a lot of traveling time. So all in all, even if we activated the trap, I think it was a gain of time. So here, it is the other way around. Deika finds the key. I'm going the other way around, but I'm still pulling a monster, because if it happens that Deika with the monsters within the key and the monsters in the following room are not sufficient, because we end up playing in a high kill floor, we would have needed to go back into where I went in order to pull and waste traveling time. And as you saw, the last big ninja guy that we killed, I think that was the last monster of the room. So the tiger that I killed on my way of the corridor was absolutely needed, and that saved us having to go back into my room to kill another monster. So here is the first instance of a mimic, something that we are going to see a lot. They are very infamous, sadly, when it comes down to playing deep dungeons. There are monsters that basically are hidden within the treasure chest, as you probably can tell with the name, if you're familiar with either Dark Souls or even Final Fantasy. There are a lot of mimics in Final Fantasy. At the moment, they are not really dangerous. They will start to be quite dangerous and quite tricky to handle, especially for us DPSs. Starting level 61, 71, we really need to be careful when handling those. And the way that they work is fairly neat, depending on which treasure we decide to open. So from floor 1 to floor 30, they can be hidden in bronze chests. From floor 31 to 60, they can be hidden in blue chests. So here, if we are trying to open blue chests to potentially open an extra magicite to wipe the floor, we potentially have the problem of finding a mimic. And from floor 71 to the end, they will be hidden in gold chests. Opening a mimic, even in the later floors, is not necessarily a bad thing, because killing a mimic basically progresses on our way towards making the kill requirement. So if the key is not activated and we open a mimic, then making the kill can potentially allows us to open the key. Something pretty nasty that they can do, however, is that they have a debuff called a pox that will inflict a dot, so damage over time, but it will also decrease the damage that we deal by 20%. So having a pox running is not really a good thing. Fortunately, we can interrupt the cast of the pox with a knockdown with crowd control abilities, or with an interrupt. And if the mimic still manages to inflict the pox, because for instance, we can have a floor debuff. So here was a waste of time because I wanted to go fast and I triggered a ring. The problem is that most of those monsters will waste time because they are standing still and not moving, not following me. So we need to take care of them as fast as possible. But yeah, going back to the pox, if the mimic is able to inflict the pox because of various circumstances, we still have a commander called a purity commander that will simply cleanse the pox inflicted by the mimic. So since the strategy here is not really complicated to grasp, we're still running like crazy, killing stuff on the way and finding the key as fast as possible. Allow me to take like a moment to discuss basically the biggest side of deep dungeons, because it is not speedrunning. I think especially 4-man speedrunning has been fairly small, if not non-existent. But what is really known within the Final Fantasy community in general is the practice of those dungeons solo. So you can absolutely um, do these solo. Obviously, it will take a lot more time, especially depending on which class you pick. Um, but it is doable, and the game intends it to be to be doable because of the fact that you have 2 titles that you can unlock by completing Palace of the Dead, which is marginally longer than Heaven and High because of the fact that it is 200 floors instead of 100. But there are 2 cool titles that you can unlock by completing those 2 deep dungeons solo. Uh, it is really interesting. It allows you to really, or I mean, not allows you. It forces you to really focus on what you're doing. It's really interesting in terms of decision making. It really pushes you towards playing better. And if you're finding that you don't have anything else to do on the game because you've done your main story quests, you've done all the savage raids, you've done the ultimates, and you're struggling to keep interest within the game, well, I highly suggest you that you take a look at playing solo Palace of the Dead or solo Heaven on High. Heaven on High is slightly easier because you're at 10 level higher. Palace of the Dead is synced at level 60. Palace of the Dead, yeah, it's 60, and Heaven on High is 70. There are other types of commanders. Most of them are common, but there are specific commanders for Palace of the Dead and for HOH. But what makes Palace of the Dead more complicated is the fact that it is so much longer, and it takes a while to bring a save file from floor 1 to floor 180 when the difficulty really starts to pick up. And it is pretty much the same here in on Heaven on High, playing solo, especially if you play a tank, because at the moment the Gunbreaker and the War are possibly the 2 easiest classes that you can do the solo with, because you have the resistance of a tank and you have good crowd control. So even though you're not dealing as much DPS as a DPS, well, you're still very, very tanky, so surviving is not really an issue. But starting floor 81 and even 71 for some monsters, the difficulty really picks up a lot. And it will also be the case with the speedrun, and you'll see that I will really go play by play when we start reaching those higher floors, because the monsters really start to pick up in terms of difficulty and tankiness. So starting floor 41, you see that the art design of the floors have changed quite a bit. From floor 1 to floor 40, we are in a really Japanese-inspired style of environment. And here, we are more in a classical dungeon-esque type of environment, with a lot of stone and stuff. The monsters still here are not really hard to defeat, especially when it comes down to how Ether Pool works. Basically, the strength of your equipment gradually picks up. Let's say that even if you are at 99.99, from I'm going to say something very completely arbitrary. I'm not sure whether those values are right, but it is just to give you an idea. From floor 1 to floor 10, the maximum amount of stats that you have is with an ether pool of 60 plus, like a plus 60 plus 60. So even if you're 99.99, it doesn't really matter because you're dealing as much damage as if you were at level 60. And basically, within this floor set, 41 to 50, our ether pool at plus 99 really starts to shine. We are basically at our maximum amount of stats. So we are basically dealing as much damage as we could be dealing. And the monsters there are not really tricky to handle. So this is why I am still running like crazy, even though I am on my own, dealing as much damage as possible, and I am not scared at all at 1v1ing those monsters, because the damage that they deal is really not frightening, because I have a little bit of survivability with a protective buff that the ninja has, and I also have the very strong regen potions that I mentioned earlier. So I can pop one whenever I feel like I'm in danger, and the regen will be sufficient to keep me alive against pretty much everything in these floor sets at the moment. Okay, so let's take a look at our resources. Even though here we have another very nasty floor debuff, which is a no item, no object debuff. This prevents us from using any sort of items, so that includes the potions that I mentioned earlier. So here I need to be slightly more careful. So this is why I'm not pulling. I'm simply trying to gaze within the following room to see whether the key was there, and it wasn't. So I'm just teleporting and trying to sprint to not cost the team too much time by traveling all the way over there. But yeah, so you see that we are starting to stack up on a lot of resources. We have our 3 magicites. Once again, I'm repeating myself, but the magicites are a very strong item that allows us to wipe the floor. We have 3 of a lot of items. We have, I think, yeah, 3 for the sight and the safety, the 2 ones that I mentioned earlier. We also have 3 of affluence and alteration. These 2 are extremely important resources that are going to be used proactively when we are starting to reach floor 81. These 2 types of commanders are really cool because they will influence not the current floor, but the following one. And what they can do for the also the flight. I also meant the flight. So affluence, alteration, and flight. They will affect the following floor. So alteration will transform the mobs of one room of the following floor into either mimics. So mimics, I've explained what they do, or Korrigans. And Korrigans are what you want to have. It is a gamble commander, but Korrigans are monsters that can be one-shotted, and they are so weak that even the provoke spell from a tank that normally deals 0 damage is able to kill a mimic. Any ability that will target them and touch them, so to say, will kill them. The affluence pomander is a recovery pomander that allows us to recover potentially some of our resources, because it will increase the number of chests that are going to appear, in the following floor. And finally, the flight commander, which is probably the most important out of the three, depending on how you or the prism that you use to see the commanders. It will decrease the kill requirement for the next floor, and this is going to be very, very clutch in this speedrun, as you're going to see. Um, I think, I'm not really sure, but I think it basically halves the number of kills that you need to make. So let's say that you are on floor 91, where the monsters are the bulkiest. They are really strong, really resistant to damage, and you end up having to fight a high kill floor, a floor where you need to kill like 10 to 12 to even 13 monsters. Well, this will have, I think it has the kill requirements, and so that allows you to mitigate this, to mitigate the side of the RNG that screws you over by forcing you to kill a lot of monsters. So something that I've not mentioned before, another type of room that we can encounter, another type of RNG potentially screwing us, but it can also be used as a recovery tool, are treasure room. So treasure rooms are rooms where there are usually 3 to 4 treasure chests. I think normally they always spawn with 4, if I'm not mistaken. But what makes them potentially very scary is the fact that there are a billion monsters within them. There are like 10 to 15 monsters within the treasure room. I encountered one in the last floor, and we will see some more treasure rooms in the rest of the speedrun. But yeah, depending on when we find them, if we find them in fairly early floors, we can pretty much blast and nuke our way through. When we find them in later floors, when the monsters are really, really nasty, um, either using a concealment commander, which will turn us invisible, which is really cool, to basically move through the monsters with nothing growing us, or using either a magicite or another type of wipe that I've not mentioned yet, which are petrify or petrification commanders, which will turn every monster into stone, and when they are in stone, they can be one-shottable. It is not infinite. The petrification commander only lasts for, I mean, the effect only lasts for 30 seconds. So you need to clear your way towards enough kills and clearing the way towards the beacon within those 30 seconds, which is sometimes not happening, unfortunately. But yeah, you can also use a petrification commander to go through a treasure room. If you're familiar with Heaven and High, looking back once again at the resources, you can also see that we still have 0 raising commander. Raising commanders are a pretty neat safety tool that will bring back to life the next teammate that will drop KO. So it is not a way to resurrect somebody that has already fallen, but it is a prevention tool. And you'll see that we're going to get screwed, I think, not in the set, but probably in the set 71 to 80, because we did not have enough raising commanders in order to. So here is the perfect instance. Sorry, I'm cutting back to play by play, but here we have a treasure room with like 10 monsters. Because of the fact that we are still floor 51, mimics cannot be hidden in gold chests. So I'm taking the time to open everything. So here we are wasting a little bit of time because Deka did not notice that the TP was in this room, so he's going to have to go back. But yeah, here the concealment works. So you have 1 minute of invisibility. This invisibility will deactivate itself when you are attacking, landing an attack on a monster. When you are using an item, so if you're using another commander, you will deactivate the TP. The invisibility. And if you're taking damage, so whether you're opening a blue chest that explodes, you will deactivate the invisibility. Or sometimes some monsters, not at the moment, but in the following floors, you'll see that some monsters deal AoE damage within their patrol, sorry, AI. Even if they are roaming within a room and not patrolling between rooms, sometimes they will deal damage because this is how they are encoded. And if that damage touches you, you are going to suffer from the invisibility deactivating itself. Another benefit from the concealment commander is the fact that you are not triggering traps even if you walk on them. So when you're invisible, you're not triggering traps, which is also very, very nice. So yeah, we are able to find our first raising commander, which is pretty nasty because we are already at floor 53, and this was the first one that we found. So you'll see that we will not be able to use a raising commander at floor 71. What we usually do, and this is also something that is done when you're playing solo, is the fact that you can use a raising commander at floor 71, one at floor 81, and one at floor 91, covering basically every of the last three sets of floors. Uh, and this is what we also try to think about doing, at least remembering ourselves to do it. Uh, if we are stacked, but we will not be stacked, and this will cause a little bit of time wasted, unfortunately. So here is one of those instances where finding the beacon in the second room from the spawning room is not necessarily that great because there is a lot of traveling time involved. Because of the fact that with the two adjacent rooms, north and east of the TP, there were not enough monsters to activate the beacon. So this is a time loss, unfortunately, kind of caused by the RNG of the layout, and kind of caused by the RNG of the kill requirement, where we kill everything and we still have to invest some travel time in order to find the next mob and getting the kill. And it is in those instances, for instance, where, for example, sorry, where finding a mimic can also be clutch because if there is a treasure chest in the TP room that is not activated, you save the traveling time by opening the mimic, getting the kill, and potentially activating it. So here another kind of play-by-play comment. You see that in the room that I am in currently, there was a little bit of branching. So Deika went south and I went east. And because of the fact that I could not see in the last room whether the TP was there, I aggressively called the use of a site commander in order for me to have the mapping and the rest of the team to have the mapping so that we would not invest too much time into finding the key and in the traveling time to be able to reach it. And this was definitely a time loss because of the map layout, unfortunately. But all those little thingies of traveling around the map, being very proficient with mapping because you don't need to get inside the room and activate the minimap of that room to be able to see whether it has a TP or not. And this is also where communication becomes really important. Exactly like this, I gazed at the room on the north, and you can see the beacon while we still not had the information on the minimap. And this is where communication really, really shines. But unfortunately, if the monsters that we've cleared in the previous room and that are present in this room are not sufficient, then we will need to invest traveling time. But fortunately, all we have to do is get the clears and move out of the way. And this was also a mistake because the key was activated, but I still opened a blue chest, which was completely useless because we are already capped with magicites. So opening a new magicite while the key is already activated and we have the key, so we do not need to clear the way towards the beacon, was a waste of time. So all those little mistakes of decision making and also all the clutches that we do thanks to decision making are what makes those series of floors, because once again combat really is not too much of a problem there. Those mistakes and those good decisions are a part of how we are saving time. Another part of saving time is getting absurdly lucky with recovery of certain items. If we are able to stack on flight commanders, whoops, sorry, I forgot to remove the little box for the site. Apologies here. So if we are able to stack on flight commanders and find extra ones, that means that we are not going to get as screwed by the kill requirement. If we find multiple and multiple once and once over and over and over and over again petrification commanders, then we just can run through the floor and kill everything. And you're going to see that this is going to happen in the next set of floor from 71 to 61 to 70. So there is obviously a lot of RNG, exactly like this with the use of a alteration commander that allows us to find Corrigans, and every Corrigan that you kill progresses the requirements for kills towards activating the beacon. So we already have 3 free kills, meaning that if we find the beacon, then we're going to be it's going to be easy peasy. Here we find a flight, meaning that in the floor 58 we will have less kills to perform, and thanks to the Corrigan kills, a single kill in this room and we're good to go. And in floor 58, thanks to the flight, we will have a minimum amount of kills to perform in order to open the way. So all these elements are involved in us losing or gaining time. And this is why speedrunning this is so interesting and keeps the speedrun so fresh. Another flight here, another extra flight that will impact floor 59. All these elements are what makes speedrunning this content so fresh and interesting every time. Obviously, we're kind of at the head. Sorry, we're kind of relying on RNGs to help us along the way. By the way, another effect of flight is the fact that it reduces the kill requirement, but it also reduces the number of kills. The number of monsters that are spawning in every room. So it can be very good, but if you're flighting a high kill floor, then you have to invest a lot of travel time in order to go find monsters in other rooms. But yeah, everything matters in terms of time at every little random aspect, and how you react to randomness is what makes the speedrunning of this content so fun. And I think this is why soloing it is so popular, because every run is different, every run is super challenging, and every run really uh, allows you to shine if you're good at making decisions. And because of the fact that every run will have different resources, how you handle resources and how you manage recovery of certain items is what makes this content so great. So here the other group, Deika's group, found the key, but it was in a dead end. So they make the kills. I 1v1 a monster, and depending on whether we have enough kills, and this was not sufficient, so I think they killed 2 monsters, I killed 2, so we will have to kill 5 monsters, meaning that since this floor was flighted, there was probably 10 monsters necessary to kill. It was still a gain of time, especially because of the layout. Once again, Deika found the teleportation, but it was in a dead end, especially after the spawning area, meaning that if it was not flighted, we would have needed to invest a lot of traveling time, killing the stuff in the TP, going outside of the TP to kill stuff, and then coming back to the TP. And sometimes when we find this, we don't go into the TP straight away because we know that we're going to need a lot of kills. So we go first the other way to the opposite of the teleportation beacon in order to make sure that when we go into the TP, sufficient mobs have been killed, and with the remaining mobs in the teleportation room, we can clear our way. So boss at level, so floor 60, sorry, is slightly more tanky. So there's a significant bump in terms of resistance from the boss here. A lot of AoEs, but it's not really complicated to dodge. All you gotta do is to stay on the edge. I don't know why I'm standing in the back of the boss, because in Heaven and High there are no positionals. No positionals are required for melee DPSs. So So a cool aspect. So you heard me there count down from 5 to 0, and that was simply to time the trick attack. Trick attack is a debuff that a ninja has that increases damage taken by the boss for 15 seconds. And what we try to do is to save resources, as I mentioned before, for the boss, so that we put all our burst and most damaging abilities in the trick attack window. Okay, so floor 61, we're starting to reach the floors where monsters start to be fairly complicated to handle. There are a lot of monsters, such as here the little plant and the little jellyfish thing, uh, that inflict damage over time abilities. So here you see that Deika is using his invulnerability spell. This little icon there is his invuln, because he had the bleeding from the Onryo and he had 4 stacks of poison from the plant. So this is where uh, prolific use of the regen potions, so this is the buff of the potion, the use of clemency from the paladin, the use of normal potions, really starts to become an integral part of tanking monsters and staying alive while the DPSs are burning through monsters. You will see here that we get fairly lucky. As I mentioned before, we are heavily dependent on RNG, especially for the recovery of certain items. And this set was very, very lucky, especially with the petrification commanders. Okay, so here we have another big room, and since items are available, a general strategy or something that we pretty much do every time when we enter a big room is to use a safety commander. This has 2 effects. First, it allows us to deactivate the floor traps, and this is very important because you've seen us, if you paid attention, uh, hug the walls when moving in the rooms, especially starting floor 31. We really try to hug the walls when moving around floors, around rooms, and around. I mean, traps cannot spawn in corridors, but if you're hugging the walls of the rooms, you're very much less likely to trigger a trap. Unfortunately, hugging walls in a big room is not possible, so using a safety commander allows us to basically move freely around the big room, but also it removes the fake teleportation beacon. So the first beacon that we find after a safety commander has been used is the right one. So here we're starting to pull monsters, and Deika will find another petrification commander. So he uses it, and we just, thanks to the side commander that we found in the spawning room, so an extra site, we are able to have the map entirely, localize the teleportation beacon, clear our way towards the beacon because monsters are petrified, and gain time like this. So here, unfortunately, you will not be able to see it, but I will tell you what happens. So here I find a frailty commander. So once again, it is a commander that increases damage taken by a monster by 30%. It also reduces their damage inflicted by 30%. And this is great because Deika was pulling monsters in the key room, as you can see here, in the key room, and he activated an auto trap. But because monsters were frailtied, uh, Pule and Bibiri were able to nuke everything very easily, and Deika was able to survive. So frailty is also a very, very potent item to use. So also something that I've not mentioned, our use of strength commander is fairly aggressive. Basically, considering the fact that Bibiri is by far the strongest character in the roster at the moment, because he's playing a summoner, and summoner is completely busted right now. To really emphasize and use the strength of the summoner, we use a strength commander on Bibiri every beginning of floors because the fact that we are most likely going to fight our way through a lot of monsters, and since um, the strength commander lasts for 8 minutes. If Bibiri doesn't die from one way or another, and this unfortunately is going to happen, I think in floor 72 or floor 71. The 8 minutes are going to see a lot of use from the strength commander on Bibiri. And every time we find extra commanders, we are using one either on Poulet, especially in the earlier stages of the run, when Poulet is able to move around freely since she is a ranged DPS, or on myself because I think I'm doing slightly more damage because of the ninja than the machinist. So when we are in later floors, especially like this, when I'm really not counting on much because their monsters are a lot trickier for me to 1v1, so I'm just taking the information of what is happening in the room that where Deka is not going, and then I come back to Deka to help for DPS. And so in these floors, I will take the priority for the strength commander. But yeah, considering the fact that they are fairly frequent commanders, we try not to stack ourselves at 3 all the time and stay stacked. This is also something that can be a time loss if you stay stacked at 3 commanders and not use them, because you will potentially be able to recover them, and if you were not using them before, then it's kind of a waste. So we try, especially at the beginning of floors, always use a strength commander, and if we find an early strength commander again, we will use another one so that it covers pretty much the entirety of the floor set. Unfortunately, if you use a strength commander like at floors here, if I was to use a strength commander right now at floor 67, 68, 69, it will not carry over into the next floor set, unfortunately. So here I pulled a mimic, and because of the fact that mimics are becoming more and more scary, scarier and scarier rather, uh, I instantly call, "Hey, I pulled a mimic, please help," because they can crit really, really hard. At level, I mean, on the floor set 61 to 70, they can still be manageable, but the more we progress and the scarier they become, to the point where you can easily get two-shotted by 2 crits if you're unlucky, and obviously you do not want to tempt Lady RNG. So here we find an extra commander, and because Bibiri already refreshed his strength commander, I only had 1 remaining minute on the commander, so I used it. And we are still back at 3, meaning that Bibiri will be able to use a strength commander as soon as we spawn into the next set of floors. And another petrification commander. So this is like good RNG. A little bit of a mistake. We are running in the middle. We could trigger a luring trap, which would be pretty nasty because monsters there can be quite dangerous. And since the monsters are spawning after the petrification commander has been used, they will not be petrified. But yeah, here as you can see, I am being much more careful when it comes down to scouting. And as soon as I can, I go back to Deika to contribute to killing. So here we have the information that we have a treasure room there. So the first thing that we need to do in order to not invest items unnecessarily is to figure out whether the teleportation room is not the other way around. So I did not scout there because I think Citron was AFK. So to help Deika with the kills, I was going with the team. But as you can see here, the the teleportation beacon is not in this room, meaning that we will need to manage the treasure room. We will need to manage to find our way through all those monsters. And very fortunately, we were able to find an extra concealment. So what we do is we turn invisible and we're simply going to cross the treasure room. Also, very luckily, the teleportation beacon was not in the treasure room. It was the resurrection beacon that we will not use. But yeah, so here obviously the layout of the floor is pretty nasty, so we need to invest a little bit of time of traveling it towards finding the beacon. But in the end, we manage our way. So also this was a unnecessary, well, not really unnecessary because we still did not have the amount of kills needed to activate the key. So opening here the chests and potentially triggering a mimic was not really a big of an issue.
Oui. Non. La même. J'ai tout bouffé, j'ai rien pour le boss, je suis un connard. J'ai vu ça, ouais.
So here a little bit of a mistake. Myself and Bibiri, we involved a little bit too many resources in terms of our damage kit, and so the boss fight will be pretty bad. And I mess up my mudras, so yeah, this fight was was pretty bad.
Tu peux me donner un timing sur ton 20 minutes?
But yeah, as you can see, we are pretty much like 4 minutes ahead in terms of time. The boss will take like a minute and a half because of the fact that we did not burst as much as we wanted to. In terms of strategy, so here as you can see, the monster is we really start to have tankier monsters. So the boss puts in kind of a puddle on the ground, and then it will charge at you. And the idea to survive is that you need to stand in the puddle that will make you go really small, and that will make the boss miss the attack. But you need to go outside of this puddle as soon as possible because then the AoE damage that it does will one-shot you if you're mimified. So as you can see in terms of resources, we are at 2 safety, so the one in the top right hand corner of the Pomander list. We did not recover the Pomander that we invested in the big room at floor 62, sorry. And we still only have one raising Pomander, meaning that we are not going to use the raising Pomander there because we try to keep it for potentially the hardest set, which is 81. When it comes down to the speedrunning, because we will invest the vast majority of our wipes in 81 and 91, and 91 we will basically empty our stock of Pomanders. But yeah, so here, because of the fact that I see that the layout is really bad, there are a lot of branching. We have 3 ways from the spawn, and from the room that I visited, there were a lot of also branching. I decided to invest a site Pomander in order for us to have the information on where we needed to go.
Non, non, t'inquiète. Tu l'as peut-être fait, j'avais pas entendu.
And so here we're going to have the gamble of we're only pulling what's on our way and we're going to the teleportation room as soon as possible. And unfortunately, this will cost us because the 2 monsters in the teleportation room are not going to be enough. However, the little trap that you see on the floor is a luring trap. And so what we are going to do is to, on purpose, activate the luring trap in order to force more monsters to appear on the room. First, I tried to open the chest in order to see if there was a mimic. And then we opened the luring to save us on traveling time. Unfortunately, I think Bibiri had an important phone call at the moment, so he wasn't there to burst with his Bahamut. But I still think it was because he's going to be there very shortly. I still think it was a gain of time because of the fact that we saved on traveling time.
Ouais. Je pense que le temps du kite, on l'a récupéré sur le squelette en mob.
So here monsters are even tankier than in the previous floor sets. Managing patrols, managing the monsters that you pull becomes extremely important. Deka is basically busy managing the monster that he pulled, so it is our responsibility as 3 DPSs to always pay attention to the corridors and what is coming behind our back, because the worst thing that can happen is tunnel vision on the monsters that you're currently trying to kill, and then finding yourself having one or two or even three patrols aggroing you because you did not see them coming.
Hop, je la stun. Ah merde, t'étais déjà là, excuse-moi.
So those little does are really, really problematic. You'll see that they will cause a death in the following floor. What happens is that when they detect a character behind them, they will use their rear hinds to deal damage. So it's significant damage. It's like 30% of ADPS health pull, but it also causes a pretty nasty knockback, and you will see what happens in the next set, in the next floor. Sorry. So here we're fairly lucky because we still were missing some kills to activate the beacon, and a patrol just ended up coming right through the corridor.
Ok.
So another type of monsters that are in these floors are the wolves that are really, really nasty. Those little dinosaurs are pretty easy to manage. They only do a cone AoE in front of them, and they a circle AoE towards the character. So they're really easy to manage. Their auto attacks are, they start to hurt, but they're not as bad as the little white wolves that you see there. And so what is going to happen is that Deika is only pulling the dough, but the knockback is also inflicted on Bibiri, and Bibiri comes into the aggro zone of the wolf, and that kills him. And because of the fact that we did not have an extra or extras, we were not stacked in raising commanders, will have to invest time into killing the monsters so that Pule can raise Bibiri. So how can you manage deaths, character deaths in Heaven and High? Well, you can use either a consumable, a Phoenix Down. However, you can only use it when your character is outside of battle. You can use a raise spell from either healers or the summoner. This is also a great benefit from having a BBE as a summoner. Not only is he the strongest DPS at level 70, but he also comes with a battle raise. He can use a raise whenever he wants, as long as he has mana for it. We can use a raising commander. So once again, the raising commanders will raise the next person that will die. It will not raise somebody that has already fallen. And finally, so I only mentioned the teleportation beacon, but there is also a resurrection beacon, the second item, the second icon that you see on the top right hand corner next to the key. It also has its own kill requirements. Sometimes the resurrection beacon activates before or sometimes after the teleportation beacon. And when somebody dies, you need to simply interact with the beacon if it is active, the same way that we do with the teleportation beacon. I mean, we don't need to interact with the teleportation beacon, but so here we are very lucky because we had a combination of an alteration commander, so we were gambling because we had an extra one, and unfortunately we had a room filled with mimics. But since we were lucky and we found a petrification commander, we were able to clear them fairly easily. So here, once again, I am only taking the information. I am not taking the risk of fooling a mimic. So I'm going all the way back to the team to to get the kills. Considering the fact that also I noticed that the key room had two branches, east and west, meaning that I really was confident in us not having to go back to the north room to get some kills in order to activate the beacon, basically. Oh, also something that we did not gamble on in the previous room. You noticed that we killed those mimics with the petrification commander. We also did not try to open the gold chest that they dropped, because of the fact that here we are definitely in the floors where mimics can be hidden in golden chests. And since we already had the kill requirement, the beacon was already activated, there was no need for us to open the chests. You'll see that this reasoning will be slightly different in the later floors, because here we are pretty much stacked. We have 3 flights, we have 3 alteration, we have 3 petrifies, we have 3 magicites. We are basically stacked on everything that we need. So opening a mimic when the beacon is already active is a complete waste of time. And this is something that you need to pay attention when you're trying to speedrun. And this is also something that you need to pay attention when you're soloing this content, because especially from floor 71, you're not necessarily fighting against the monsters when you're doing solo. You're fighting against the time, because when you're solo, it takes a lot of time to navigate through the floors and getting the kills, because the monsters are so tanky. We're only going as fast as we are because we have 3 DPSs and we have a summoner. It is not rare for the floor set 71, 81, and 91 to end up with only a few minutes remaining from the 1 hour that you have from the start. So here, what Deika is going to do, he has a blue chest there, and he's going to activate his invulnerability and activate the trap, leading to a lot of damage on the Mammoth and the Yuki Tokage. So those plays are also a very nice strategy that you can use in order to gain a little bit of time by dealing a lot of damage thanks to either the blue chest that can contain traps. So this was a gamble. It could not have happened. It could have not happened, sorry, where the blue chest would simply have nothing in it. Or rather, an equipment improvement, but since we are stacked, it wouldn't have done anything. Or a trap. And you will see Deika also play around landmines, because every little trap, if we were to have a site activated, every type of trap has a different design. So we know what is going to be a landmine, and we know what is going to be alluring an auto trap, and so on and so forth.
Préparez-vous à interrupt, ça fait un moment qu'il a été pull. Ah non, c'est bon.
So something that is also very important there, if you speak French, you may have grasped by the last sentence that I said in the comp chat, is the use of crowd control abilities. We're really starting to fight monsters there that have nasty abilities, either AoE abilities like this one, but this one is it a dodge, or mechanics that just deal damage on their own and that are hard to handle by moving around, especially if there are a lot of monsters or if we don't have a lot of room to move around. We have a fair amount of crowd control abilities. Myself as a ninja and Deika have a stun ability that is used to basically stun the monster, so that will interrupt the casts of the monster, but also the automatic attacks that the monster does. Deika and Citron also have an interrupt spell that will be used to stop the cast of certain abilities. For instance, the pox that can be cast by a mimic can be interrupted by those spells that Citron and Poulet and Deika have. So here we find an extra flight. So that was That was pretty nice, meaning that the 78th floor will be flighted. Less kills to activate the beacon, the teleportation beacon. And here we are moving our way towards the making or reaching the kill requirement. So another little something that I didn't mention, in the top right-hand corner of the screen, you see this little clock symbol. This means that basically our spells, our attacks are coming faster than they normally would. Not only do you have debuffs that can be very nasty, you can have like no items that we've already seen. We can have no abilities, which are pretty nasty. And the crowd control abilities that I mentioned earlier are within the spectrum of those no abilities debuffs, so we would not be able to crowd control monsters. No regen, we have the gloom, which buffs the monsters, but there are also certain buffs. Here we had a haste buff that allowed us to make more damage. So once again, as soon as I open a mimic, I scream for help because you saw that a normal attack dealt 6,000. That was slightly more, slightly less than half HP for me. If the attack had critted, I would probably have lost 2/3 of my health. So I really need help there if I pull a mimic. So here we find information that we did not go the right way. And here, since I found an invisibility, a concealment commander, I was waiting for the party to finish their battles, just so that we could use the concealment and move our way towards the teleportation because it was activated thanks to the flight. The monsters in those two rooms were enough to activate the beacon. We were lucky to have a concealment, and that is also a very nice use of the concealment commanders. So here we find the use for a new type of commander, the Witching commander. So Witching will transform all the monsters in a fairly small AoE into weaker monsters that are not able to use any of their abilities. They can still attack, and sometimes their strength is pretty much the same as the natural monster. However, it is a very good kind of recovery item when stuff starts to go pretty nasty. And this is what I mentioned earlier: paying attention to what is coming, especially in the corridors when you start pulling monsters in rooms, in order not to get trapped and angled by patrols. And so this was a good call, a good safety call, to be able to manage the monsters. You also saw, especially if you're familiar with Final Fantasy XIV, the use of the limit break. So since we are in a light party, we have 4 people. We have the limit break gauge that is filling up while we are in combat. I tend to use it on bosses because the melee DPS limit break is a fairly nice source of damage for a single target attack. However, here it was a better use of a limit break to clear all the monsters that were witched, that were transformed. Also because of the fact that since their hitbox becomes so small, they are easily packed together, making sure that they can be within the AoE of the limit break. So the second to last boss, which is kind of a reskin of the Fenrir boss that we fight in the Realm Reborn patches, fairly easy boss to be honest. When you know that there are some safe spots, one to the east I think, and one to the north, if I'm not mistaken. But you will see that all the little ice blocks here that are appearing on the screen, we do not care whatsoever for them. we're simply standing here and we will dodge the cone AoE that the boss does. But they're starting to become beefier and beefier. You see that we've already been there for like 45 minutes, 45 seconds, and we've only barely scrapped half of the health. And once again, I am calling here. You see that this is the trick attack also here. And I am calling for the burst. And here you see the Bahamut. So Bibiri will be able to put all his biggest damaging attacks. The reason why we bring the summoner into the trick attack, which is nice. Something that I didn't mention, and I'm going to mention now, is the fact that I mean, we put symbols above our heads just so that it is easier to see who is going where when the spawning room has multiple entrances. So Bibiri and Poulet know where to go. Sorry, where to go. They're simply following the big green one, and they know not to follow the chain symbol. So something also that we try to do to gain a little bit of time is to activate the prompt to quit the instance before killing the monster so that we can press the button as soon as possible. And here you see on the time that thanks to all the petrifies that we found, we saved a lot of time in the set 61 to 70. And because the fact that we did not recover pretty much anything in the set 71 to 80, well, we lost pretty much all the time that we saved. Okay, so here we start the second to last set, which is, I think, one of the hardest sets to fight through, unfortunately. So here we use a raising commander as soon as we start. And since the first floor never has debuffs, we usually tend to fight through it. This is also a general strategy for the solo resolution of these floors. So what we tend to have is a strength on Bibiri, but also a frailty. Once again, frailty will increase damage by 30%. So we have a 30% damage increase on Bibiri and a 30% damage increase for all the party on top of it, thanks to the frailty. And so we are here scouting to the very, very minimum. We are basically moving as a group. And the idea here to go as fast as possible is to continuously deal damage on those monsters. You see that they are really, really, really tankier and buffier than the monster that we used to pull. So here, Deika is, depending on the monsters, it will really refrain from pulling multiple at a time, especially the big chimeras there, because they have pretty nasty AoEs. So here, because we are still struggling to find the key, but we already met the kill requirements, we invest in concealment. You're going to see that here we are not waiting to recover items and to have extras to use our resources. We're going to use pretty much all the commanders that we have between the 20 floors that are separating ourselves from the top at the moment. So here we invest an alteration. So we are gambling on the spawn of mimics potentially, or on Korrigans, which would help us meet the kill requirement. So here we have one of the debuffs that I mentioned earlier, the blindness, which is really nasty. It basically makes us miss half of our attacks. But because of the fact that we get very lucky with the Korrigan spawn, we have 3 Korrigans. Well, we basically go with the kills. We do not cleanse the debuff because we have also a very strong resource called the Serenity that will cleanse all floor buffs and debuffs. So next floor is not impacted by either flight commanders or alteration commanders. There are some debuffs, as you can see. We have less max health and no automatic regen for health. These will impact our survivability and Deika's survivability, but they do not impact our damage, so we're going to fight through the floor. So we try to open chests there. We do not have the kill requirement met yet, so we open every chest. And what we try to do, especially when monsters have already been pulled, is to not open chests, not to have a very scary situation where Deka already has full health monsters and also a mimic. So we are trying to wait until the situation is clear. Either the monsters that Deka has pulled are almost close to dead or dead already, before opening gold chests. Because once again, they can contain mimics, and their mimics at 81 are really, really painful. They become extremely complicated to manage. Here, uh, in these floors, Deka will try to always have a steel commander running because the damage is pretty nasty. So here we have we're really lucky. So here you see that we have massive debuffs, no items, blindness and gloom. But here we find a petrify. So we invest the serenity to cleanse everything, and because we can recuperate the petrification commander, we clean our way through the floor. So the strategy there is we do not just attack monsters blindly. What is really important, especially when you see that the layout is just god awful on this floor, is to clear the way. Make the use of the fact that monsters can be one-shotted to clear the path towards the teleportation beacon. And unfortunately, because the petrification is not eternal, it only lasts for 30 seconds, it took us like 30 seconds to navigate through all the floor. So fortunately, we're able to dodge the little elephant there, but we will have a patrol to kill. But since we did not use any damage abilities, because everything was one-shotable thanks to the petrification, we simply are going to burst the head of the patrol, and we're going to be lucky because the monsters here are looking away. So this is something that I did not mention before, is the fact that monsters will have different types of aggro. They can aggro from sight, so you need to pay attention where the monsters are facing. They can aggro from sound, so it did not happen on this run, but sometimes you need to walk to dodge the aggro of certain monsters, and sometimes they aggro from proximity. So no matter where you're facing, or no matter where the monster is facing, so here we have pretty nasty debuffs. We have blindness and gloom, and we also found the key instantly. Also, something that was really nice is the fact that there was a treasure room there, so a lot of kills. And we are also able to recover the alteration. But yeah, so the goal here when using resources is to make the most out of them. If there are debuffs that are too painful to fight through, there are two options. Either we wipe the floor, either with a Magicite or a Petrify, or if the floor before was either alterated because we had an alteration commander or flighted, then we consider the option of using a Serenity. The thing is that we absolutely need to conserve an healthy amount of Serenities for the last set, because floor 99 will mandatorily be a triple debuff floor. And so if on the floor 99 we have like gloom, no item, no magicite, and we no longer have a serenity, then we're really screwed, and we will have to fight a very tough floor by hand with no ways of wiping it. So here we're mostly involving the use of alteration to potentially gamble the presence of Korrigans and help us along the way. We're also using a little bit of flight commanders in order to decrease the amount of kills that are necessary. And also we're trying to use a little bit of affluence to increase the number of chests. Another type of commanders that I've not mentioned the use of, but that is going to see a lot of use in these floors, is the fortune. You've seen that monsters can drop chests naturally, and this commander simply increases drastically the drop rate of the chests.
Le prochain est sécurisé, by the way. Dans le TP, let's go.
So here we have no abilities, meaning that our damage kit is heavily impacted. I also pulled a mimic, which is pretty bad. But because of the fact that the floor is flighted, and because of the fact that we were able to recover a Serenity Commander, we will use a Serenity there to remove the no ability debuff, allowing us to fight better. Was a good call, especially heavily influenced by RNG because we had the Serenity. And here we walk on a luring trap. Here luring traps are really nasty because monsters are super healthy, and a bit like the petrification commander, alteration does not last for more than 30 seconds. So here I had very good decision making where I called the fact that we needed to single target every monster to make sure that when the witching would fall off, Deika would not have a lot of monsters. They would all be pretty much dead when they would come back from the witching. If we had done only AoE damage, all of the monsters would have basically equal health. They would all be dropped low, but they would potentially be all alive, and they would all start attacking Deika as soon as they popped from the witching, which would potentially lead to a death. So once again, in order to move through a room, we use because we already had cleared the requirement for the kills thanks to the ring especially, we use a concealment to move through. So here we are also super lucky because once again, like 2 floors in a row, we are able to recover our third Serenity, meaning that we're going to be really nice for the last set, the 91 set. And here there are debuffs once again that only affect our survivability and does not affect our damage. And since we are blasting through pretty much everything, the monsters do not live long enough to become dangerous. So here, pretty nasty layout. You see that there is a branching there from the spawn, and here there were 3 other rooms. So I don't remember if we call a site. But yeah, what we're doing there, basically, we are moving around while doing damage. We are still, I mean, we are playing the floor on 2 fronts. First, we're mapping because Deika is pulling something and moving around to map. And we are also, the 3 of us DPS is dealing damage. So while we are fighting through this floor, we're still trying to do it as efficiently as possible by doing damage and killing stuff, contributing to the kill requirement, and mapping the floor. Sorry. And this paid out fairly well because we were able to basically meet the kill requirement while moving on the floor. So here once again no abilities. But something that happened was that we recovered. Yeah, so yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, we're going to Petri because no abilities is pretty substantial in terms of time loss. Our DPS really suffers from not being able to use what is called off global cooldown abilities. But we are extremely lucky with another petrification commander. And here, even though we had a petrification up and running, and therefore we still had the key activated, Deika still opened a chest because since we're starting to invest a lot of resources, You see that we're missing a lot on the flight. We only have one flight here. This one is the flight. We only have two alteration. We only have one frailty. So there, the gamble of potentially recovering a very good commander would be a great gamble to play. And if we end up winning the gamble, it's a huge time gain. So Onra, the final boss, a very kind of neat strategy that allows us to basically mitigate all his mechanics. As soon as he drops underneath 85%, he will start casting a very powerful earthquake attack. So we all stack together here on the eastern point of the map. We wait for one punch on Deika, then we move slightly to bait the spawn of a meteor proximity-based damage. We wait for one punch, and then we move out of this big line AoE. Then he does a big AoE on one of the characters, so this is why we stay at the maximum distance while still being able to attack. Then he does an AoE around him that you cannot bait anyway. And then it's rinse and repeat. We move him back to our safe spot on the eastern side of the map, and then he starts casting his earthquake again. So this fight is kind of annoying, especially for melee characters. So I am really the only one suffering from it, because Deika has magic spells that he can use at a distance, while I am stuck with using throwing knives. Unfortunately, I do have some distance attack, but not on demand, unfortunately. But I'm still making sure to really time the debuff that I'm applying to the boss every minute on a strict timing, just so that it lines up fairly well with Poulet's biggest attacks, as well as Bahamut from BB, just to make sure that we are dealing the most damage. So here we have 5 wipes. For the last set, because we will need to fight from floor 91 to floor 99, we have 5 wipes. We have 3 petrifies, 2 magicites, 1 safety, 2 alteration, and 1 frailty. We have a couple of strength, we have a couple of witching. So we definitely are not in a bad spot. We have a lot of options, that's for sure. So Deika instantly uses a steel commander to mitigate the massive amount of damage that the monsters in the last floor set deal. And it is basically the same opening as before. So we instantly use a raising commander just to cover ourselves from a potential death, which will not happen if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. I don't think we have a death in the speedrun. We open with a frailty, leading to more damage from all the party on all the maps. And we open with a strength commander on Bibiri. And once again, the goal here, so it is kind of lucky there. It is not the same physiognomy of floors in later stages, because here fighting is the most important part, not really travel time. So here we find instantly the key. So the goal here is to clear the room, the key room, and then move one room at a time to deal damage and to kill stuff. So these monks characters have an ability that can make them invincible for a few seconds, but as you can see, if the situation lines up itself properly, we have enough burst to kill them before they can turn invincible. And in any case, Deika and myself have a stun that will interrupt the cast of the ability. So we gamble with an alteration. Once again, the alteration will allow us to potentially have Corrigans. But we have pretty nasty debuffs. So depending on what we see here, because the floor is not flated, it is only alterated, if you can call it this way, we will most likely use a wipe, and here it is a petrify. We are trying to see whether we have Corrigans, but we are not going to waste mapping the entire floor because this will involve way too much time. And in the in the end, as you can see, these are mimics, and it is actually a mimic treasure room. So yeah, pretty nasty room that you really do not want to have anything to do with. And this was kind of a mistake. So I mentioned that here we're trying to open treasure chests to try to recover the wipes, to try to recover resources. The problem is on this floor, on this particular floor, we have no ability, so we have no way of preventing the pox from happening. And the monsters are also gloomed, so the mimic will deal 10-20% more damage. So kind of a misplay, kind of a loss of time, especially considering the fact that we had the key already open. But yeah. So once again, pretty nasty debuffs. We have no abilities. We have a gloom, and we're going to use a petrification again. One thing that we are trying to do when we are using wipes is to try to open chests, to open gold chests, to see whether they contain a mimic or not, because we are really struggling with trying to recover resources to make sure that we have a very strong tool for everything, for every floor. So when we know that we're going to wipe the floor either with a magicite or a petrify, we try to open the chests, because if we happen to open a mimic, then the mimic is going to get wiped. So this floor is alterated. There are Corrigans normally in this floor. Considering the fact that we only have 3 remaining wipes, we try to spread the use of resources. So we use the strength, myself and Poulet. So we all have strength going on. So Deika decided to invest a Serenity to cleanse the debuffs that we had. And we're going to fight through the floor, especially considering the fact that we were able to find the key fairly soon. So here, the stun was able to prevent the cast of the invincibility ability from the monk. And so yeah, this room, this floor is alterated. So we gamble the presence of mimics, but mostly Corrigans. But here, considering the fact that we found the key fairly fast, and we are really lucky with the kill requirement, and we also recover a flight pomander that was kind of nasty in terms of RNG, really nice. We didn't make the most out of the alteration on the previous floor, but it doesn't really matter. So we have 5 floors to fight through, including this one. This one is slighted. This one has only debuffs that affect our survivability, so we fight. That is basically the decision making there in terms of the use of our resources. Are we able to fight through? Because the debuffs allow us to fight through. And if we cannot fight, it depends on whether we have certain resources going. So if we have a lot of strength going, then we can potentially Serenity and cleanse the debuffs of the floor, allowing us to fight. Or we can, if the floor is flighted, we can also cleanse. If nothing was set up for the current floor and debuffs are too bad, we will simply use a wipe. So here I noticed that we were starting to branch off fairly nastily. Deika and the party was over there. I was going this way, and I had no visibility whether the teleportation was all the way over here or here. I called the use of a site commander. just to help us along the way. What they ended up doing is to play for the blue chest that was in this room here in order to potentially recover a magicite. It did not happen. And then what we do is we pull along the way. Since we have a site commander, we can move fairly freely in the rooms while paying attention to the monsters so that we do not aggro something that we do not want to aggro, obviously. But we are moving our way while dealing damage. We are contributing to the travel time, and we are contributing to the kill requirement for the floor.
Ouais, j'ai contourné à gauche, je le voyais à 100 pas.
Chance sur le prochain.
Ouais.
So yeah, here we had to manage the debuffs. So Deika needs to be careful with the health because of the impact on his survivability. And we were pretty unlucky considering the layout. So here we call the use of a Patri because of the blindness, and I still took the time to kill a few monsters just in case we were on a high kill floor. Sorry. So here is the instance of we're still trying to open chests because we are lacking a wipe. We still have one floor that we need to clear, and we don't have a wipe for it. We have 3 floors to defeat there, and you'll see that 97, 98 are going to be basically the same. We have 2 big rooms. So what we do is we safety first to remove all the traps and to remove the fake teleportation beacons, and we're going to magicite both of them. And so what we do there is to try to gamble the use of golden chests, and I open a golden chest. And since I open a golden chest, as soon as I call, hey, I have a mimic on my ass, please use the magicite, I become invincible. This is also a very cool trait of the magicite, is that as soon as you pop a magicite, you become invincible for 7 seconds. And that allows you to move freely around while the summon is happening. So 98 is the exact same stuff happening. We have a big room with no abilities, so we just we were able to recuperate earlier a flight. I apologize. Safety is literally the name of the flight in French. So we recovered a flight commander earlier in the floors. So what we're going to do is to wipe this one, and we're going to safety for the last floor, and we will use a Serenity to cleanse everything, and we will fight for the last floor. But you will see that the end is fairly clutch, you're going to see. We also have something that is really cool, is the fact that we have still three witching. So Deika there can be fairly aggressive with the use of witching. Something that is really cool with the use of witchings is the fact that since monsters, when they are turned into frog and chickens, they can no longer cast. As soon as they are transformed into those monsters, they will just follow Deika along the way without stopping to cast their abilities. So it's pretty nice. Not only do they do less damage, but they also follow nicely. So here I call the site because this is the last floor, so we can use a lot of stuff. Something very important is when you use a site, do not use a safety, because you can potentially use the traps at your advantage, and this is exactly what is going to happen. Here Deika has like 5 monsters or 4 monsters. It's going to use another witching to turn everything into frogs and chickens and kappas. We use the landmine to burst through everything. Because it is a flighted floor, we have less kills to make, invisibility instantly, and then we go to the key. So that those two series of floors from 81 to 91 were not only very lucky with all the very strong items, especially the petrification and serenities that we were able to recover, but the decision making there on the last series was really nice, allowing us to PB pretty nicely. ending up with a 1:55:15.
Ouais.
So as you can see, the time here is easily beatable because we are pretty much behind for the first half. So if we are very lucky on the first half, we can gain a lot of time. But as I mentioned before, the first half in terms of floors of the run is fairly homogeneous and heavily RNG dependent. Obviously, the whole run is kind of RNG dependent, especially depending on what resources we are able to recover. But decision making becomes extremely important on how you manage the resources that you are able to recover or to gather along the way, especially from 71 to the top. All right, so I hope that this video was helpful for you guys to understand a little bit better the speedrun, potentially interesting you into starting the speedrun on your own. I heavily encourage you to give the deep dungeons another try, especially if you've played Final Fantasy for a while. They are really, really, really interesting. Whoops. They are really, really, really cool. Speedrunning is super fun. Soloing is really challenging, but also super fun. There are a lot of Discords that are available. You can just type Deep Dungeon Discord on Google, and you will find a lot of communities that are heavily involved in giving advice, helping each other, having point of views and stuff to help you guide you through the way. And if we are able to submit the speedrun of Heaven on High to some speedrunning marathon, I hope that it gets through and that we are able to show it, because I think it's really, really fun. All right, that's all for me. Feel free to ask questions in the commentaries, to follow me on Twitch and stuff, to follow our speedrunning adventures, and I will see you in the next chapter. Bye bye. Take care, everyone.